Welcome to Stacked in Japan. This week I'm going to talk about the tool that I tested, Claude Code CLI, trying to build a local AI agent in my full-time job, and then thoughts around the topic of how I can create, well, how could anyone create one person's unicorn? All right, so let's talk about tool of the week. This segment we do stack or scrap, meaning stack if we think it's something we would want to invest in or recommend, and scrap if maybe you want to wait for some updates or avoid using it. So this week, the tool that which I tried was Claude Code, quite a popular coding agent right now in the arena with Codex from OpenAI and a few others. I think it is pretty good. I actually had avoided using Claude Code not avoided, didn't pick Claude Code as my first choice potentially. I think I used a bunch of others, such as Cursor, Junie, or JetBrains AI Assistant rather. Before Junie, I guess there was just the standard one. Now they have Junie, which is a bit more sophisticated, doing planning and whatnot before taking actions through a to-do list. But Claude Code came up again recently, maybe one of the more recent releases of Sonnet potentially. Yeah, the reason I did pick it up was that the engineers I work with, they recommended it to me and it was saying that it was like way better than any others, like far ahead, which really surprised me. So if the engineers I work with are saying that, I feel like it's worth a try. So I did have a go. What worked well was it was super easy to set up, and immediately I was able to start prompting in multiple sessions. There's no overhead, it just works in your command line. But I was a little bit surprised though that it actually felt slow initially. I think I only asked it some basic things like, can you add a button here, or like some really minor feature changes, but it actually did a lot of thinking. And I was like, why would it take this long? It's not exactly complicated. Like Cursor could do, I think Cursor, maybe some others could do it really quickly. But then I realized what it was. I think it was spending all this time just figuring out the context from basics and sort of building itself up. It did get a bit faster in runs afterwards, but even then, I think it's a little bit limited. What I would say is you actually need to read the documentation, maybe more than I did, and understand that you probably need to run the init command before you start doing things, and let it build a reference to your code base and then add to it. You can add it to it yourself later on. I think it creates something called like a Claude markdown file that just kind of helps it navigate the repo every time it makes a call. Every time you prompt it to do something. And yeah, then from there, it actually is not too bad. It is a reasonable pace. I wouldn't say like super fast for a lot of things, but generally something like Claude, I think you want to parallelize anyway. So as long as you can give it a task and it does it reasonably accurately in a reasonable amount of time, it should be okay. And then I realized, there are now tools and things that you can keep doing to improve the reference context even more. So you probably don't want to do this for large repos, but you can basically have like a tree of some kind for the whole repo. I think there are some things with GitHub where people like kind of turn the whole repo into like a one file. Things like that makes it easy for Claude to navigate through the repo. That said, so overall the experience would be good. I've actually been trying to use it more and more. Try and parallelize potentially with some additional tooling I'm building. So my verdict is that it's stack. Yeah, stack it, use it once you understand it a bit better, build some experience. I think I wouldn't scrap it. So stick with the stack recommendation, but I think my problem was probably that it was like heavily hyped to me as the best tool overall by far. So I expected a lot out of the box, and maybe that was the I was expecting that to like just magically happen. I think the gap that I had was the rest of the tools I was using like were all in IDs mostly, I believe. So they generally had already like pre-indexed a lot of the reference context that it was using. That way, naturally, when I started prompting it, it would just know a little bit more than what Claude did out at the start. All right, so that's tool of the week. Now for this week's founder log, I wanted to talk about some product progress. While I did get some product progress, I actually want to talk about something a little bit different. And it was actually my full-time job. So I am trying to optimize my full-time job so I can do more and more with the same amount of time, rather than invest more time if I can avoid it. So, do the standard 8 hours, whatnot. It is kind of what the way the company wants to go anyway. Multiple layoffs, less people, use AI, all that kind of thing. So one thing I was looking at, especially since this was a quieter week, almost no meetings, I wrote a local AI CLI tool. It's not quite an agent at this point. I would say it's an aspiring one. The intention was to basically be my executive AI assistant. I wanted to see how far I could get without anyone noticing that I was using it. Obviously, I don't mind it drafting replies for me, but I definitely do not want it to do it on its own yet. I don't think it's there. I think a few times I have used AI here and there, not heavily, to sort of summarize or make things more concise. I then try to, I guess, bring my voice back into it afterwards. That's still pretty hard to do, I think, consistently. So this is a bit of an experiment. Now, I mean, to give you a summary of what it was overall, it's really just a Python CLI tool. It's using typo and some of the standard packages. It's calling out to OpenAI just because that was the easiest one to access within the company. And then, yeah, you prompt it with a few commands, and then it goes and pulls data and does a bunch of things. Ideally, it should pull from all the different sources I use in my day to day. So like email, Slack, calendar. I'm a manager, by the way. So generally, I'm not doing a lot of coding, but I am doing coordination and just making things stay on track and giving inputs into strategy and like all that kind of thing. So for me, it's ideal if I can, protect my time, do the critical things that are urgent more than anything else, and making sure the team's unblocked. A bunch of things that, that I just lose track of sometimes is just so many Slack threads, so many Jiras, so many emails, and I wanted just some way for something or someone to go through all that and be like, hey, I think this is probably top 3 you want to look at today because someone's been pinging you like 3 times or whatever. Right. So with that in mind, that's what I kind of went with. And yeah, it has a few commands. Like right now, they're not all like intermingled. They're more around individual functions. So I'm just testing them individually before I would probably loop them all into like one major like summary of the day kind of command. But yeah, I have commands like Jira. By the way, it's called like Kuroko after the Japanese sort of stagehands that like kind of blend in the background, but they help move things around. Yeah. So with the CLI, I use it for Jira, for email, Gmail, and then Google Calendar, and then Slack, ideally. But unfortunately, I hit a bunch of blockers. So these are the kind of things I've learned already. There are a lot of blockers around API access, naturally. And because it's a bigger company, you can't just, go in and get an API key, even though it's pretty easy if it was your own sort of workspace. So where I was blocked on, Google Workspace APIs. So Google Gmail and Google Calendar. They are pretty easy to access and set up, but you need to set up a Google Cloud project. Right now, you can't do that in the company without IT approval. So that was one blocker. And I kind of wanted to avoid any approvals because I was trying to do it on the down low to see how far I could get with it, like optimizing a lot of things I do. So yeah, and then wanted to avoid that. So I haven't gone for that approval just yet. The other one was the company does use Glean, and Glean does naturally have access to that. So I was like, okay, if I could access, well, maybe even just orchestrate it through Glean, I might just get access to all the things it's hooked up to already. Turns out, since I last looked at it, they updated the access, so you can't actually create a bot without getting the permissions. And then even if you do create some sort of, not called bots anymore, they're called agents now by Glean, but you create a Glean agent, then it becomes like publicly visible throughout the whole directory across the company. So I was like, okay, like kind of wanted just to be really personalized to me and kept local and private. I think that was key. So local, private on my own machine as much as possible. And then, I mean, obviously I'm calling out to like LLM proxies and stuff that do connect to OpenAI, but I felt like that was minimal compared to some of the other things I was doing. So to continue, yeah. So gave it a Glean. That's why I have this Python set up. So yeah, the Google Workspace APIs. Then we have Slack bot APIs as well. And again, it needs approval. I can create the Slack bot without approval, but then I think adding it to the workspace, like my own channels and stuff, even just to me, I think it requires approval. The only thing that was like a saving grace was Jira. I could just go into Jira and create an account key for my own user and API key for my own user, and it was fine. So I was able to call Jira directly. I haven't been able to completely solve some of these issues, but I think I've been trying to figure out a workaround to just get the tool to use a browser as if it was me. So if I can't get direct API access, use something that will open up a browser and like kind of click around and pull the information it needs itself. So I haven't got that completely working yet, but I think that is something I want to try. One clear example is for Gmail, or for email in general. I tried to use Gmail. Obviously I got blocked as mentioned before with the Workspace API, but I was like, okay, there was like another, obviously I'm running a bunch of these things through for AI assistants, but it was like why don't you try using IMAP? It's been a while since I've even looked at IMAP or heard about it. But I guess if it's easy to access, I can try it. And it was basically, I think all you need is your email address plus an app password. So, okay, it sounds fair. I'll try it. I tried it. It worked-ish. Only issue was it was so slow to pull emails. Like I left it running for a couple minutes and it was barely working through the list. I didn't even ask for a lot of emails. I asked for like the past day or so, and it was like, okay. And then it took easy 5 to 10 minutes. And then when I tried to run it again with a bit more like detailed logging, and it was actually taking I could literally count the seconds per email, like literally count to 5, or even maybe it was more than that, count to 10 even. And it would come up. It would say like, oh cool, read this email. I'm like, oh man, like there's no way that would be good or fast. Because maybe they'll give me like the daily updates, but then what if I ask for it? Oh, I need to check like all these other things I might have missed in the past month, etc., etc. Like the time, it'd be faster for me to click around, honestly, at that point. So that was one learning. What was the other learning? Oh yeah, through going through this proxy that I mentioned to call OpenAI, which I think is quite a common pattern in these bigger companies, is they typically have something to avoid like data leakage, right? So like PII, or personal identifiable information redaction. So I actually was trying to get it to summarize my Slack threads, or some really big, your typical long Slack thread where there's like 10 people in there. They're all having like an ongoing conversation. You come check back and there's like 60 messages. I wanted it to give me a quick summary at least so I could know what I was looking at, and then tell me if anything was directed towards me. So if there was like, hey, please do this, or could you look into this? Because there's just so many players. And it's not even like it was just my manager or whatever. It's in like all directions, like manager, peer, team members, like everything, stakeholders even. So I was just copy and pasting the whole thread into the LLM. But then I realized that it was struggling to tell me, like specifically me, like what I had to do. So it was like lumping up random action items that were assigned to other people, but it became mine according to its summary. And one of the big points here was that the redaction had caused the LLM to lose context of the people, like in the conversation. So the way it was doing it, it's like, okay, this looks like a name. Let me pull it out and then replace it with like a kind of like a tag that says person. And then I assume that's what happened like for all the different users or names. And it's going in there without the context. Then it comes back out. And then it's the same thing. It's going to say, okay, like, I think roughly that you're probably the person asking, so this is what's been assigned to you, right? And it doesn't help if someone's used vague language to not really point it or tag anyone specifically. So how I solved that problem was, came up with it's a bit of a workaround, but sort of a name mapping in the tool. So before you send it to the proxy, which is going to strip it out, you switch everyone's names with a code name. So for example, like manager A or PM B or director A, things like around that line. I tried to be a bit more specific, but as much as possible. I didn't want to put everyone into the map, but just enough to give it enough context. So I did that and it actually worked well. So then it figured out, okay, you're manager A. This is the stuff that's directed to you as best as I can tell. So I was able to get a bit of a response there. So what my feedback so far is, it works well if you can get around some of that I guess the downside of some of this tooling. And then for me, I think the Jira, like it sounds simple, but it was honestly a godsend for me. Like I've been pinged to death by some of these like operational excellence type things where it's like, oh, fix your A/B testing toggles or whatever. The things that most teams like pile up over the years. We're supposed to look at them, but then there's always a higher priority. And this is not just my team, this is like across the company. But yeah, it was good it could tell me like which was, who'd been pinging on which ticket more recently, so I could prioritize like super clearly. And then it actually told me what the current problem was too. I think it's like, you haven't answered, you haven't checked this, or they're asking for a specific thing. And then I was like, oh, okay, then just let me check that and then go into that ticket immediately. Obviously, it'd be nice if it could answer for me, but I think I'm okay just giving a quick answer myself, honestly. If it looks too like, well, we'll have to see. If it doesn't look good enough, it might just increase the back and forth, and then I lose the gains, right, in productivity. So yeah, I think that's been an experience so far. Pretty good for like, I'd say like half a day, not even half a day of messing around. Maybe if I was to keep improving on it, I need to definitely fix it, how well it can use a browser. And then how much grunt work I can get it to do on my behalf. I think, yeah, just the sheer number of like input of information and conversations, if it can help me stay on top of that and seem really responsive, I think that'd be amazing. And then for meetings, I think it's not too bad maybe, but yeah, if we can get it to understand my calendar, maybe get some productivity gains here and there, look for opportunities for that, would be great. So that's my experience this week. And now the last topic for today, I think talking about maybe just a random thought, is I'm hearing more and more of this idea, vision, goal, whatever you want to call it, of a one-person unicorn. I mean, it's obvious why the AI tech CEOs like Sam Altman are kind of bringing this one up. It would show immense value for the tooling that they're building, right? If you could have one person run a unicorn. By the way, unicorn is defined as like a company that's valued at $1 billion USD. How would you go about, utilizing the AI? So obviously it can automate a lot of stuff, no doubt. But obviously things like quality is a huge issue. And it's, at some point, it's still really hard to completely eliminate the human. But if you get the processes, I guess, really well done, maybe you can do quite a lot. So I think you can get it's definitely not I think a few years ago, there was always a scale question for any startup, right? You probably anyone who's worked in startups for the past 10 years or even longer, software was obviously something that made scale way easier than it was in the past. So you could have a very small company still make, X millions. But it would always be what should you scale? And then how do you scale it? So you'd have to be really focused still, on the things that you think had the most value to automate. And then if things were hard to automate, you would have to invest more and more dev time before they even became force multipliers, right? And now with LLMs in the picture, it's been more of a wizard that can just sort of, you just put things into the black hole and it'll spit out something. So you can kind of get more of the automation done faster. But yeah, with that limitation in the past, I think the time factor, your own time, became scarce, right? And it's a limiting factor for individuals and small teams with that capital. One very easy example is a lot of people would love to create their own freelance job, or maybe a small consulting engineering firm, right? You take a few projects here and there, you get them done. Cool. The biggest issue with a lot of those was, and why a product-based startup was always more attractive, is that you couldn't scale it beyond people. So you would have, with the product, you can sell, it's software, right? It's virtual, digital. You build it once, you sell it 1 million times, and you make money. With consulting, you actually got to get someone to go talk to a client or find clients, line them up, build, scope out projects, develop the projects, deliver them, bam, you get money. You can only do so many of those at once if you're relying on humans, right? Obviously, okay, let me state this before we go to that. So you use humans, and then the only way to keep building up the firm would be to hire more people, right? You would, as an individual or maybe a small team, you'd hit real limits pretty quickly. And that was the biggest problem. So everyone, a lot of companies, maybe you think of 37 Signals, I think Basecamp, those, they started as a consultancy, and then when they found a product, and then they pivoted to the product, right? Nowadays, I think you can almost have your cake and eat it. So you could probably handle a lot more projects to actually get to some form of profitability quickly with a small team, as long as you can maintain the quality, obviously. And then, every part of the step of the process, from going from lead gen, closing going through that whole process, requirements, design, development, release, and then if you do a retainer, all that generally is way faster than it would be in the past. So hypothetically, you should be able to take on more projects, make more money. So I think that's actually a big gain and a big shift in the current environment. And the cool thing about that is means you can have a lot more small players in the market. So the market will become more fragmented, kind of like the Japan market in general, which may be a good thing. So the big guys, your typical FANG, Amazon, Apple, whatever, they will get smaller and smaller, and then there'll be other players in the market, which I think is a good thing, right? Now, going back to the original question, with all this in mind, how realistic is it to become the one-person unicorn? Basically, every process you do, you need like an engine to automate every single task. And it needs to be light touch. So, answering queries, if you have that, it should just be like an automated message as much as possible, right? I think it's gonna be very specific on what product it is, though. I definitely don't even consulting. It's not gonna happen. It has to be a product. Like this also has a scale issue. But if it is a product, man, I feel like it needs to be one of those products where it's also like you build something and it just catches on fire, and that's why it sells heaps, and that's why you kind of get that valuation. But like $1 billion is a lot. That's not even revenue, I'd say. I think when they say this is more valuation, so you would have to really prove that your value is like unprecedented enough to the point where someone would trust a one-person company to run all their business. Because one of the problems you're going to have is the products that make this money. Usually they're not always, well, they can be consumer apps, but more often than not, they are a huge enterprise app as well, or B2B. So that means you've got to support gigantic enterprise customers. And then they also have risk tolerance. How are they going to feel about relying on you as a vendor if you're only one person? Well, technically you'd be like, I'm one person plus unlimited people because they're all AI, but it's a harder pitch, right? And then you got to think, if you want to go on vacation or take a break or something, how can someone sub in for you? It depends how strict on the rules you want to be here, but I think that's the realistic take if we're going to be true to the statement. So it's an interesting thought. I don't think it's in the realm of fantasy. I think it will be possible to get pretty close. And every month I'm more convinced that things are moving that way. But it's an interesting challenge to have. And it's actually one challenge I'm personally trying to take. Not that I think I'm going to hit it, but I think if you have that as your North Star, it's quite interesting how you prioritize different things. All right. Thanks for tuning in. I think we're ready to wrap up. This is sort of experimental, first episode. Hopefully I'll get better at this over time. I'll be trying to do this weekly. So yeah, follow Stacked in Japan, and I'll see you next week.